Dying violently during a global war against aliens is bad enough, but imagine having to go through that pain and trauma repeatedly. You're caught in a time loop, and it's not going to stop until you kill their Omega. And while this movie is fun, all that sounds incredibly intense, and it is. So let's sit back for a minute, take a breath, and relax before all the madness begins. And if you're going to enjoy a good sit, you will probably want a refreshment by your side. I have a suggestion for what that refreshment can be. Bev, you take a guess what it is.
Is it Sparkplug coffee?
You've done this before too, haven't you? And I stepped over the last word there, Sparkplug coffee. They're the Java sellers who offer the freshest, fairly traded, premium Arabica beans in all of Canada. Speaking of our home and native land, we will get free shipping on our orders, but Canadians and Americans alike will get what they order within a week. You can choose decaf or half calf, incidentally. Half calf. So if your adrenaline is already up because you're in a war zone with creatures from another planet, then put less calf in your cup and start shooting at them aliens. Get mad at them damned aliens. Sparkplug's menu has an assortment of great blends and delicious roasts. They even offer you seasonal blends that rotate, get this, within the seasons. So if you have a favorite, stick with it. But if you like variety, then think about changing it up from what you were enjoying last fall or winter. Now, all of this can be made even better if you sign up to be a member in the Autopilot Coffee Club. You can pause or cancel your membership anytime, but while you are a member, you'll get to enjoy perks and deals, not to mention that you save money on every order. Set it up so that you can customize to get your orders when it suits you. And don't think of this as a standard Coffee of the Month club. Not with that flexibility, it's not. So put sparkplug.coffee/HYES into your browser. Using our HYES discount code will give you a one-time savings of 20%. All right, this movie isn't going to magically review itself. That's our job. Let's get cracking. Bev?
And action! Have you ever seen
Edge of Tomorrow, or Live, Die, Repeat? Happy Memorial Day to our American listeners, and happy Monday the 27th to everyone else. And thanks a lot for putting an ear to our 592nd episode. Have You Ever Seen, or formerly the Top 100 Project, reviews classic motion pictures, usually from a long ways back, although not so long ways back in today's instance. And take note that we spoil all the secrets of this movie and sometimes others. I'm the not-so-full metal bitch who could never do a plank, although I'm not a bad mimic, Ryan Ellis. And here's the angel of Verdun who wakes up with a jolt at 6 a.m. every single day, or right around then, my wife Bev.
That's me.
And I'm mixing and matching there. You're both Cruz and Blunt, and I guess I am too. A mimic and a full metal bitch. And unlike Tom Cruise, you don't wake up on a military base or in a helicopter at the end of the movie. So the coming attractions opinion question for Edge of Repeat, or Live, Die, Tomorrow, or Edge of Tomorrow, Live, Die, Repeat. The Groundhog Day concept of a day repeating for one person but not for anyone else has been done in movies lots of times, and it's often been done very well. We'll leave Groundhog Day out of it because that has to be the answer if it was an opinion question, right? Who would not agree with that? Well, maybe some wouldn't, but they'd be wrong. So what beyond that is your favorite time loop movie, and I'll give you some examples. Source Code, Run Lola Run, Palm Springs, Happy Death Day, or even its sequel, Happy Death Day to You.
This was hard. There's some really good examples of this subgenre, but I'm going to take a chance and say Run Lola Run, which I haven't seen in like 20 years, but I loved that film when it came out. I hope I find that it aged well when we revisit it for the podcast later this year. It's kind of not a true
programming note.
Groundhog.
not currently in our lineup. I better remember to do that later.
Yeah. We might cover it later this year. It actually is still a little up in the air. I shouldn't make any promises.
Your point taken. Sorry.
It's not really, in fairness, a Groundhog Day movie because in every proper Groundhog Day movie, there's one character who repeats the day and they remember everything. She doesn't remember everything. Every time it resets, it's brand new to her, but something different happens to just change her day in like a sliding doors way.
True.
That being said, I would say it's a tie between Edge of Tomorrow and Palm Springs. Really fun movie and a really great example of the genre modernizing and getting meta because everybody already knows what to expect from that genre and taking it to the next level up.
As for that Run Lola Run thing not being accurate, thank you, Internet search engine. That's one of the ones that came up when I looked for Groundhog Day-esque movies.
Oh, no, when you look at it, because I did. I knew I was going to have to answer this question. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't forgetting anything, and I looked it up, too, and every single one lists Run Lola Run. But I don't think it's a true example.
No, I think you're right. I think all the ones I just mentioned are pretty good. I might go with Happy Death Day.
It's a great movie, too.
Horror movies. It's got horror in it. Obviously, it's quite funny. I guess I'd go with Edge of Tomorrow, maybe even over that, because it's a very good movie in its own right. It is definitely humorous at times. Maybe it's not as funny as they thought it was. But you're right, Palm Springs is something we should watch again and maybe enjoy it. Maybe I'd say that one if we'd watched that last night or something. Okay, the good movie with a bad title, Edge of Tomorrow? So generic.
Live, Die, Repeat is so much better.
We'll talk about this whole controversy later on. So it was released wide by Warner Brothers 10 years ago on June 6th, 2014. That, by the way, is the 70th anniversary of D-Day, which I guess was maybe deliberate. Why they released it that day. This is a war movie. We're doing this on Memorial Day.
The beach invasion is certainly an homage to D-Day.
The film didn't do very well here at home, but it brought in nearly $200 million more than it cost to make worldwide, so somewhat a hit. But yeah, the flick never really caught on with domestic audiences, only opening in third place, first weekend, third place, behind The Fault in Our Stars and Maleficent, which was in its second week. A Tom Cruise action movie didn't even open number one, never mind struggled to stay there, which it did. It never got to number one at all, but struggled to stay in the top 3 or something. But then again, that was the decade or so after the whole thing when he was promoting War of the Worlds, when we found out he was in love with Katie Holmes and did the couch jumping thing and told Matt Lowry he was glib and told Brooke Shields she didn't need to be on antidepressants, and Scientology came out. And I'm not sure that's connected, but after War of the Worlds, he didn't make a big hit movie other than Mission Impossible, Ghost Protocol, and the one after that, Dead Reckoning. That was the last one. What was it called again? Anyway, the fifth Mission Impossible did well. The fourth one did quite well. But almost everything else, Oblivion and Jack Reacher and some of these other films, Night and Day, didn't really do all that well. Maybe that's because of the way he was acting around that mid-2000s period. He wasn't doing that anymore by this point, but he wasn't so bankable.
Can't say he was canceled because he was still making movies. And I don't know if that's why audiences didn't see those movies. It felt like a time when there just wasn't a ton of appetite for traditional action movies, which is a shame because... I don't know about those two movies. I never saw either of them, but I think you and I would agree that action movies as a genre has suffered in the 21st century. It's really had a struggle to be fun.
Yeah.
But to me, always his comeback is Tropic Thunder.
That was in there too, that's true.
And then after that, he seemed to have redeemed himself.
But they weren't hit movies he made after that.
His PR may have changed hands, I don't know, but he remembered to keep his mouth shut when it mattered. And you see him in this or the Mission Impossible movies. It takes one movie for you to be reminded why Tropic Thunder, great example, why he's a freaking movie star. This man is a movie star.
And I agree, but he wasn't making hit movies for a while there. I think of him as somebody who always has. Hanks as well around this time frame, other than maybe Toy Story 3, was making movies that didn't succeed and sometimes didn't get seen by almost anybody because it was not supposed to be that kind of movie. Like Larry Crown was never going to be a $100 million film, but still.
People get sick of people sometimes and the pendulum swings and they're like, we all love Tom Hanks, but I just don't need to see another Tom Hanks movie right now. And so it doesn't matter what he makes. It's just not really going to get people's hearts.
This film did pretty well in home media, though, which is one reason why there might be a sequel. But as many people, of course, Emily Blunt especially has said, it's hard to get these schedules together, especially Cruise's. But hers too, and Liman. And if you want to recast some of the other actors, but those three people have to be in it if they're going to do one. I think they'll agree on that. They've got to star, the two of them, and he should direct it. But Bev, Edge of Tomorrow is just days away from turning 10 years old. So please tell all of us what it's about and give us the skinny on the film.
Tom Cruise is William Cage, a major in the global army fighting an alien invasion. When a huge battle goes sideways, he's killed, only to wake up restarting the day to do it all over again and again and again. Cage teams up with Emily Blunt's Sergeant Rita Vertasky, who experienced the same phenomenon in a previous battle but lost her power. Together, they figure out how to defeat the aliens by killing the superorganism that controls them, and when they do, Cage and everyone else resets to even earlier in that day, and the aliens are dead, and everyone who's been killed in the invasion is still alive.
That wasn't the same day when he resets at the end.
He wakes up in the helicopter.
That's not the same day.
He goes from the helicopter to meet Brendan Gleeson. He gets sedated and then sent to Heathrow. So is that supposed to be that he was sedated and slept for like 20 hours and woke up in Heathrow?
I don't know. I think a few days have passed. Whatever. It doesn't really matter
It doesn't really matter.
It's around the same time frame.
It's recessed to the point where like everyone you knew and loved who died heroically, hey, they're alive again. Not to worry. Which is the right ending for this movie.
I love the ending, but okay.
All right.
Or, in a nutshell, Tom Cruise achieves the Scientologist's dream and blows up an art museum. The Louvre.
They want to blow up art museums?
No, I couldn't think of a good nutshell. I thought that might be
Although the pyramid
is
a little bit Illuminati, isn't it?
Yeah, sure. That's not true. I just thought it was relatively funny that he does blow up the Louvre at the end of this film. And, of course, most of the action takes place in France. But they're stationed in England at Heathrow Airport.
He's a Scientologist, so he already believes that the Earth has been invaded by aliens.
Right. Okay, the Rotten Tomatoes numbers on this are great, even though people didn't really attend the film back in 2014. 91% of critics liked the film back then. Well, I guess over the years they have. 7.5 out of 10 is the average. There are 337 reviews on the site to back that up, and 90% of audiences. Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt both have 8 films with 90% or more on Rotten Tomatoes, by the way. Or at least as of about a week ago. We record this 2 weeks before we post it, so that could change, I guess, but around 90% at the very least. This was 33rd at the 2014 U.S. box office, only 33rd. Gone Girl was 18th. We covered that not long ago. Birdman, the Best Picture winner, was 78th. We covered that years and years ago. And my favorite movie of the entire decade, never mind that year, Whiplash, was 125th. This was up for a lot of awards, and even won some of them, I think mostly technical type awards, but no Oscar nominations. The editing, at least, was very worthy.
Oh, hard agree.
And maybe only the editing, but that was not even up for it.
The special effects are pretty damn good, too. Those creatures are something else.
All right, well, we've seen this movie a few times each. I don't know how many times. I think I've seen it 3 times over the years. We watched it on Netflix about a week ago. Some things might not be that fresh for me anyway. More than a week ago, I think it was. What did you think of Edge of Tomorrow, or really what we should be calling it, I guess, is Live, Die, Repeat? Apparently the DVD, which we don't own, on the side says, Live, Die, Repeat, Edge of Tomorrow.
What a weird choice for the studio to make. They were panicked, I guess, because it didn't make enough money.
You want to know why? Apparently, they didn't like one of the executives at least, didn't like the idea of the word kill, because it's based on a manga novel from Japan called All You Need Is Kill. And then Liman thought, that's not really my movie anyway. My movie's not really about, it is about killing, but that's not the tone of my movie to call it that. She didn't, I think it was a she, didn't like that word in there. And I guess she didn't like die either, even though Live, Die, Repeat makes a lot more sense than Edge of Tomorrow could be any title from any movie ever.
Doesn't that just feel like one of those nitpicky things that executives just get to be in their bonnet and won't let it go?
People don't want to see a movie about killing. There's enough of that in the real world. That was always true, and there are movies with kill in the title.
This is a movie where the star of the film dies 100 times.
Yes. It's accurate. It's not like he's just sitting around and not dying.
I have news for you. This is what the movie's about.
Yeah.
Live, Die, Repeat's such a cool title. I'm so mad at whoever decided it wasn't good.
Blame Warner Brothers. All right, your thoughts.
I love this movie. It's a great action film. I'm not a huge action film aficionado, but Doug Liman action films are just right in my perfect wheelhouse. And Doug Liman is at his best here, proving why he's an underappreciated Hollywood director. He's a master of exposition, an underappreciated quality, and the forgotten art of just making a film that's relentlessly fun and watchable. And his tone is always immaculate throughout a film. I'm a huge fan.
I like the chemistry between Cruise and Blunt quite a bit. And they're on screen far more than anybody else
Never
is.
feels forced. Even like that kiss at the end, which I gotta admit, I wish they didn't go with the kiss. Apparently that was an improv of Emily Blunt. It wasn't really in the script. They were never going to make it a romance. It was supposed to be just a really close friendship, which would be more appropriate to me.
And for her, she doesn't even know this guy. She met him hours ago.
Yeah, but
the
point is they have to have this extra special connection in that moment for him to want to go back and find her, because what she's basically saying to him is, I wish I could have got to know you better. And then she kisses him, and then she goes and she sacrifices herself. That is the moment that he says, well, I have to find her. This is her way of communicating to me that we could have a friendship and a relationship, and that this bond can be carried out even if she doesn't remember this.
And she doesn't remember this happened, but when he tells her that he went through it, when the movie's over, the next scene maybe, when they have a coffee or something like that, she would know, oh, I've been through this too, and then would have that connection with him that she wouldn't otherwise have, because she does connect with him always. She's blunt, there you go, blunt, and sometimes brutal with him. She kills him many times. But she respects and even grows to like him, because at least the day they have together over and over again, because they have that connection. Maybe that's one of the big reasons why she does like him at all.
A great use of the device of her having already gone through it is, first of all, when she says, find me when you wake up. The first time I saw this movie, it blew my mind. And I was like, oh my God. But also a great thing that it does, plot-wise, story-wise, is it stops the movie from forcing him to convince her, because how could you ever convince somebody? Groundhog Day, he tries to tell Rita every single day. Oh my God, also named Rita.
Yeah, I don't know if it was
How did I not put that together?
I'm not sure it's an homage, because obviously, I don't think anyway, she's Rita in the manga novel.
She is Rita in the manga novel.
Really? Even in Japanese?
No, she's
Japanese?
not. She's American. So the main character, the Tom Cruise character, is Japanese, completely different. He's a young man. He's a soldier. It's nothing like the origin story that he has.
But she is Rita.
Well, she's not actually Rita. She's somebody else who assumes the name Rita, but she's called Rita. I guess it's just like a happy coincidence. Or maybe the guy who wrote that novel, which got turned into a very popular manga series, I think it's just 2 books, but very popular award-winning manga series. The guy who wrote that book maybe did that because, maybe gave her that name because of Groundhog Day. But anyway, it's a great device that Rita already has been through it. He doesn't even need to tell her what's happening. She's immediately convinced, and it spares the movie from forcing her to believe. I get how it's an easy way to write conflict, but it ends up being filler in a movie where we've seen this 100 times before in other movies like this. Maybe not 100 times, a dozen times before. But still, I want to get into the meat of the film, and it's refreshing that they can just jump right in. Without that device, how could this ever work? Because she would need to be convinced every single day.
Yeah, and time's a wasting.
He has a hard time convincing the J Squad, and he never convinces Bill Paxton's character. He can never get through to certain people, but he always has her on her side, and so they can be a team together. It's a great device.
So as much as I do like the movie, I don't like the ending as much as you do. And I don't think the effects, even though they're well done, are awesome for one reason, because they look like the kind of thing you might have seen in a 50s movie. They wouldn't have been done as well back then. Roger Corman died, I think, yesterday as we record this. So it'll be about 2 weeks before we post it. Roger Corman's movies would have had aliens like this, for example. Nothing against him. He made a lot of movies, but they were always made in the cheap. And these are impressive effects, but I didn't care. As a bad guy, they're so generic, these mimics.
I had a rant to you this week, and it's the rant I've been having with everybody who will let me talk about it lately, is that Hollywood needs a new monster design. I watched Love, Death, and Robots, and I think 1 in 3 episodes is about an invasion of monsters that look like bugs. Different kinds of bugs, but always bugs. We as people are freaked out by bugs. That's just like a lizard brain thing. We're freaked out by bugs, we're freaked out by octopus, we're freaked out by snakes. So all this monster design, ever since Alien, we are primed for something exciting and new and fresh. A great example would be Nope. The monster design in that movie blew my mind. We did an episode about that. We talked about it so much because it really felt so special and refreshing. It gave the movie something extra versus this where it's like the monster design is there. It looks cool. In my opinion, the designers did a great job. Especially, I love the way that they move with that speed. It's eerie. It's not uncanny valley, but there's something about it that's just distressing to look at, which makes them feel very extra dangerous. But I agree with you. It's not really particularly creative.
No, they hide underground, too. That's an interesting way. They hide in the sand early on, and of course it's hiding underground at that farmhouse at about the 2/3 of the way through the movie mark. Mm-hmm. And obviously it's hiding underwater at the Louvre. But that's part of my problem, too, is it just feels like they're generic aliens, even though they're impressively done. Why I don't love the ending? Okay, I guess it makes sense because he has the ability to reset the day, and it's not intentional by the Alpha when he gets its blood on him from using the Claymore to blow it up, and then he dies. But that's how he has the ability to reset the day. He can't kill himself, just like Bill Murray. Go ahead and jump in front of that speeding bus or shoot yourself or dive off the bell tower. You're going to wake up right where you were at 6 a.m. in Punxsutawney every single day until you get it right, which is make Rita fall in love with you. But to redo it again, you go back, whatever it is, hour, I think it's supposed to be days later, whatever, days earlier, I mean, and have him have the power again because he gets the blood on him underwater.
From the
Omega, when he blows it up with all those bombs. I guess it's consistent because that's what happened the first time. But I don't know, it also feels like you've done this before. Well, then again, I guess it makes sense. The movie all about doing things over and over again. You do the same thing over and over again. The very last shot is fine because I like the two of them together, but it definitely leaves things up in the air. Maybe they thought we're going to get a sequel out of this, but the movie didn't succeed enough, and Cruise and even Blunt got so busy that they didn't make one up till now, and I don't know if there's even really... I think there is plans for a sequel.
I was watching a YouTube clip about this just earlier today. The clip itself was 6 years old, and they were talking about how there was plans for a sequel.
Live, Die, Repeat, and Repeat.
Another terrible title. What is wrong with these people? So,
no, I don't think that's bad.
Live, Die, Repeat is great. Live, Die, Repeat, and Repeat.
Well, because he does repeat things over and over again.
I get it. I'm just saying it's very clunky. Mm-hmm. I buy the Omega thing because if he had just killed the Omega, it's possible that the Omega is like Dracula. You kill that, you kill everything. There's no resetting because it's the Alphas that reset, not the Omega. But we learn that the Omega can reset and probably would have reset had he not been immersed in his blood before he died. But then he takes the Omega's power. When he took the Alpha's power, that Alpha didn't have that power anymore. We never see that Alpha again. So the idea, I think, is that if he hadn't absorbed the Omega's power, then the Omega would still have the power. There's also a lot of silly things in this movie. It's inviting you by its tone not to overthink. The point of this movie is not to be intricately perfect, and I actually think they get a lot of stuff right, considering It's a
so
silly movie.
far-fetched, yeah.
It's a pretty dumb movie. But who cares if it's dumb? It works with itself. It has this almost cartoonish aspect at times. Over and over, I've heard people describe the first act of the film, especially the first half of the film, maybe even as like a Wile E. Coyote thing.
Yeah.
Because the audience has to just be amused by watching their hero die over and over again. This would actually be insanely...
Cruise,
Tom
too.
Cruise, yeah, this would be insanely traumatic. And Emily Blunt, we see her die a dozen times as well. It could and should be upsetting, but the movie just sets the tone right.
Sometimes it's funny, though.
Yeah.
I broke my back. Wait, bang. Well, you can't do anything now if you have a broken back. You have to die and restart the day.
Brilliant
Which is
editing.
also
My God.
video game-esque. What happens in video games?
Totally
Your
a
character
video
dies,
game thing.
you restart again.
Maybe even more than Groundhog Day, the time-traveling experience replicates the experience of playing a video game. You try a level, you fail, you end up back at the beginning, you have to keep trying and failing until you figure it out, and then you get to advance to the next level. Looking at that montage where he's stating his movements out loud, go left, duck, mimic on your left, may as well be saying A, B, B, D. It's a great observation.
As I always do, I but what happens next? I think Cage goes through all of it again, only it's a different day that keeps repeating, as we've seen, I guess. After all, how does he get the reset ability back again, other than because what they did in Paris didn't finish off all the mimics and the war isn't over? That was a setup, too. The main thrust of this D-Day I think they even call it D-Day, like we say, the movie came out on the anniversary of D-Day. But the D-Day within this film was a setup by the mimics to have most of them be wiped out, and then they're going to win the war in Europe because they're going to kill so many people as part of the United Defense Fund, UDF.
And they're going to kill everybody at once.
I'm saying that what happens at the end of the movie, they finally won, but he's got the ability back again. Why does he have the ability again? Because I don't think this is over. And maybe that's what they would do in the sequel if they ever make a sequel.
This is my what happens next. He wakes up on the helicopter. He goes and he finds Rita. He tells her everything that happened. She believes him. They have a bonding experience. Over the years, they grow to trust each other, love each other, fall in love. They get married. They have children. They live a beautiful life together, overcome their traumas. Someday, at the age of 92, he passes away peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by his friends and family. And then, just as he breathes his last breath, he wakes up on the helicopter. Because it's not a day that repeats. It only repeats when he dies.
Right. The Last Temptation of Tom.
Yes.
Well, speaking of Cruise, his character, how many resets does he go through? I read it's 26. It feels like it's more, though.
It's gotta be more. 26? 26 that you see in the film, sure. Because there's a point when they've left the beach and they're driving around and they go and find the helicopter and that stuff.
Right.
And then we discover, how many times have we done this?
Yeah.
Well, every single time you dive.
But we never saw the other times that
It
happened.
could be like Groundhog Day, where it's implied that this has happened. And for all we know, it could be an edit of different parts of different days of him figuring out how to solve problems and then going back and redoing it, but we don't have to see all of that.
His Operation Downfall is a good choice of words, too, because if this had worked for the mimics, then it would have been the downfall of the UDF and humanity, at least in Europe, probably long-term in the entire planet. Now, the general, so Brigham, that's the Brendan Gleeson character, he assigns Cage to the front to, I guess, get footage of this attack, thinking we're going to win. And, of course, there were cameramen that went with people on D-Day, the real D-Day in 1944.
When they knew they were up against this.
They might have died, too,
This was supposed to be a great attack. They were expecting to win.
So he assigns him to the front to do that. Cage protests, then ends up being, you're going to be one of the soldiers. In both cases, especially the second part, except the protesting, I guess, is why he gets put into this. He pushes back so hard, and Brigham is saying, this is humanity, I don't care anymore.
Tries to blackmail him.
But yeah, right. Cage tries to blackmail Brigham, yeah. But he's so important, as you said when we were watching it, to the propaganda effort. He's helped recruit so many soldiers. If he doesn't want to do this thing, he doesn't want to risk his life, understandably, because he is incompetent at war. He's great at selling it. He's not great at doing it, in the beginning anyway, which, again, is a creative thing for Cruise to do, because he's almost always good at everything in the movies he chooses to do. But why would you put him in this position? Because you're hurting your own effort. Although I guess Brigham thinks this is do or die. Who cares about propaganda anymore?
I think that General Brigham's motivation is to move the plot forward, I'm afraid.
And also jerk off. He seems like he's a bit of a jerk off.
Who knows what kind of ego, what kind of person does that. I would say Brendan Gleeson underperforms that part. I would have liked a little more depth there in that scene.
He's usually really good,
bothers
too.
me, too. I don't like that scene. I don't like that character because it doesn't make any sense. He could at least just try to rationalize it and be like, you're our best guy. This is going to be a cakewalk. Get on the beach. This is your job. You're a major. I don't care if the sight of blood makes you weak. Nut up and go get on the beach. But it doesn't even do that.
You're going to push back against this? Fine, you're busted down to private, and you're going to just go there and be cannon fodder or alien fodder.
Yeah, but it's just necessary to get him to the position. Plus, I think there's a great character building opportunity there because the character of Cage is not your typical action hero. One of the things I think that makes this movie great is that at the beginning of the film, he's an absolute coward.
No.
He's such a coward that he's going to blackmail this guy and say, I'll ruin your career, and if things do go sideways, I'm going to make sure that everybody blames you. He's a bad guy, and he's craven, and the first time he goes through that day, what a great procedural on all the ways that he tries to get out of it and fails, and you see his fear because he really does perform it, and this is one of the ways that Tom Cruise is great. He's not afraid to be vulnerable. He's not afraid to show fear, which I think the best action movies have your heroes be afraid sometimes.
Bruce Willis in Die Hard is maybe the best example ever.
Kill Bill, one of my favorite action heroes, she will be fighting and she'll start to lose and she looks terrified sometimes, and it raises the stakes and it makes them more relatable. I love that about his character, plus it gives him so much space to grow. You know, he starts off the movie as Jerry Maguire. He's this silver-tongued, smooth-talking hotshot who can talk his way out of anything, and then by the end he's Ethan Hunt, an absolute cold, hyper competent, brave and actualized person. When he gives up his life for the cause, it's without hesitation. He's proud to drop those bombs and die. You could almost think that he's disappointed when he wakes up and he's still alive. I know he's not, but he thinks he's going to die and he's perfectly comfortable with that in that moment. So it gives his character a large place to go, which is another reason to make Brendan Gleeson, whether it's motivated or not, but to put him in that position and force him to be cornered, learn a little bit about him, and start him from like the worst possible position.
And Liman and Dion Beebe, the cinematographer, and of course the production team, and hundreds of people involved in this production, really. There always are big movies, but especially this one.
Over 100 people in those suits.
Right.
Over 100 extras.
Well, okay, a bit of a sidebar then. The new jacket, those suits were 85 pounds. They didn't want to just rely on CGI for the things. There are obviously CGI elements, especially when they have the guns shooting and whatnot, and some of the things they can do. But wearing the actual suit, the actors did it. Apparently, Emily Blunt was a little concerned about it, and Cruise said, I'll get to that at the end of the podcast. It's my last line.
Okay. Back to the Future, pain is temporary, movies are forever.
That's what Michael J. Fox said, that apparently Zemeckis or Spielberg said to him. I think Zemeckis said, pain is temporary, film is forever, exactly. But those things are mostly real, and they are in a lot of the movie. What was my point going to be? I had a tangent there. Well, I forget now.
About the competence. Hundreds of people, the cinematographer.
They made it seem like it was a D-Day-esque type of thing, and it's this whole craziness of war. And we see a lot of war scenes in this movie. It's a pretty decent choice for Memorial Day to honor the dead soldiers, and it's obviously an international effort, but of course our main two characters are American.
No, she's British.
Oh, sorry, of course she's British, yeah, and she's also the Angel of Verdun. One thing I did like, though, too, is that the reality that they give the D-Day sequence, and a lot of the movie for that matter too, mixed with all these visual effects, and they have plenty of those. Every movie does. A lot of times visual effects are just to make something look more real. You have the beach look like it's further. There's a big green screen there, and then later on you put just a beach there, and maybe you put other types of weapons and whatnot.
And that was all shot in studio, believe it or not.
But I like, too, that this movie is set in 2015, because it seems like this kind of movie would be 20, 30 years in the future, but it's supposed to be only a year after the movie came out. And Hiroshi Sakurazaka's 2004 manga novel, at that point, if it's 2015 in the book, I don't know, but it's only about a decade after he set the novel. Because usually this kind of sci-fi thing would be way off in the future, but in this case, it's a year after the movie came out. It's not way off in the future at all. So I mean 5 or 6 years in the future.
Yeah, most of the military hardware, including those jackets, they exist. Those helicopters exist.
The drop ship.
Yeah.
Which is similar to Aliens. And of course you got
Aliens Bill Paxton all over this movie.
Yeah, and Bill Paxton's in this as Farrell. We don't see him as much in the second half, of course, because he has to just basically repeat the scene over and over again. But once we see that Cage has figured out a way to get away by rolling under that truck during the push-up sequence, you don't really need to show Farrell anymore.
He's overcome that part of the day.
I like how he sometimes gets run over and killed. You got to think sometimes he would just be mangled by the truck and not be killed.
Well, that's what they don't show, for good reason, because they're trying to keep it light, but there's got to be days when he's badly hurt.
Right.
Well, there's the scene also where he breaks his back and she comes and shoots him in the head.
But she's shooting and killing him in that case, yeah.
There's got to be injuries. There's got to be days when he really suffers.
Farrell wouldn't kill him.
Subjected to that.
He wouldn't be a mercy kill. He'd take him to the hospital, and then, of course, they deal with him trying to desert later on. Because he's already called a deserter, and he tries to desert again.
No matter what state he ends up in, we do learn that if he does nothing, it doesn't matter. He'll be dead at the end of the day anyways, because they're very quickly overcome on that beach. And when he goes and he has a drink at the pub, another little nice
like
bit in
that
the
a
writing.
lot.
Yeah, I love that scene. I almost wish that it was longer, that they spent more time in that moment, because it's a great lull in the middle to take a breath. This is pretty hard for him. He totally deserves a break. So he just decides, this cycle, I'm not going to bother. I'm going to sneak away and I'm going to go have a pint and just rest. And talking to the locals, and they're all like, what do they want? And he's like, who cares?
You're a coward, sir.
But almost saying that to the audience, too. What do they want? We're not exploring that in this movie.
No.
It doesn't matter. But then, of course, we learn that if you do nothing, the whole city is completely infested, overrun. He would be dead.
He dies
no
that
matter
way.
what. If he's injured, he's going to be dead no matter what.
He wants to get drunk in the bar. Similar type of thing in Groundhog Day, where Bill Murray is depressed and he's drinking and eating, popcorn or something like that while watching Jeopardy and knows all the answers. That's one of the more fun scenes in that movie. What about Emily Blunt in this? I've become a big fan of hers. But I wasn't at this point. No, I was by this point, but a few years before I hadn't been. The movie that turned it all around for me, and I've probably said this in the podcast before, maybe we should just cover this movie one day because I liked it so much, more than a lot of people did, The Adjustment Bureau. And why I liked it so much, it's a good movie too, a sci-fi premise, but why I liked it so much was their chemistry with Matt Damon, which I think is some of the best chemistry I've ever seen between two people in any movie ever, especially not a rom-com or a Bogart and Bacall, which I'm covering the end of this week. Right. Yeah, I'm covering a Bogart and Bacall movie to Have and Have Not in 4 days. That's different chemistry. But in action movies like Adjustment Bureau and this, she has good chemistry with Cruise, very good, but it's great with Damon. And ever since that movie, I think I just looked at it and thought, I didn't really love her that much in Devil Wears Prada and some of those films. And ever since then, I've liked her quite a bit. She's been in as many big hits as Cruise has the last decade or so, too, because the Quiet Place movies, for one thing. She could have been in even bigger movies than she was. She could have been Black Widow, but I guess she chose to do something else instead of doing that, and would have been 2010 because she was in Iron Man 2, first time Scarlett Johansson was. And they got the right person to play that. Scarlett Johansson was a great choice for that, but Blunt would have been very good too. And look how badass she is in this. She's very believable.
Action star, 100%.
She got in such great shape, despite the heaviness of those suits and her worry about them being too big. She told Cruise, I guess because whether he's the actual producer or not, he's the producer in his movies, has been for 35 years or something like that, whether he is really or not. She told him that she was pregnant because she couldn't, it was the reshoots, I think is what it was. They came back for reshoots in the summer of 2013, and she told him, I can't do certain things. Why not? No one knows this but John Krasinski and maybe some family. Nobody else in the world knows this but you. I have a baby in there. I think the first kid that she and Krasinski had.
Oh, I thought for a minute you were implying that she was lying about it just to get out of doing some of this stuff.
No, she had a kid in the making. And then, of course, she's pregnant in A Quiet Place, directed by her husband, who gave her at least 2 kids, I think. I don't know how many kids they have.
Great action movie, too.
And A Quiet Place 3 might be out by the time we post this. I forget the release date of that. I don't think she's in that,
Quiet Place Day 1, I think it's called.
That's what it's called. Yeah. I don't think any of the characters from the other 2 movies will be, or at least the ones of that family. I don't think they're in that one, but maybe they are. I don't know. I haven't seen it. How could I know? It's middle of May right now. Her going through it is valuable, too, because she can tell him, don't get a blood transfusion. And when it happens after that car accident, then he loses the power for a while. He wouldn't know that, but there's a blood theme in this, because he says he's afraid of blood when he meets up with Brigham at the beginning of the film. Then it's the alien's blood that gets on him that gives him the power. Then it's a blood transfusion that takes the power away. Then it's blood again at the end of the movie that gives him the power again, but to go to a different part of the last few weeks, whatever it's supposed to be. So there's a blood theme going on, which is appropriate for a war movie. Anyway, I assume you like Blunt like I did. But you know what? This is the first time we've ever covered her before.
Really?
We will do Oppenheimer, like we've said before, because we talked about that in the Oscars post-view. Whatever wins Best Picture, if we didn't already cover it, we will eventually cover it. We'll do Oppenheimer sometime. You're not a fan. And she's in that, of course, too. But this is the first time we've ever covered her on our podcast.
I love her in general. I've been a fan since Devil Wears Prada. It's a shame almost in this movie she doesn't get to be funnier, that she has to play such a dour character, which he's playing against, and she's the straight man because she's the one that has to point a gun at him and mercilessly just cold-blooded kill him over and over again. So for you to believe that, I suppose that's more important.
But she's part of that fun, though. She's part of that comedy there. That's
funny. True. She's just being a straight man. She's just a real action hero. Her physicality, her presence, her badassness. But she's also in musicals. She's this incredible range. To me, she's one of the movie stars with the most charisma, too. I'm a little surprised she isn't a bigger star, even though she's pretty much an A-lister, but I wouldn't say she's an A-lister like the likes of someone like Scarlett Johansson.
Oh, it's close.
You think so?
You're splitting hairs, I think, yes.
Okay, then. I love her. I love her in this movie.
Another key character in the movie, of course, is Noah Taylor, who plays Noah Carter. And he's Captain Exposition, or what do you call it, Dr. Exposition, or something?
I say
Basil Exposition.
In this case, he's Dr. Exposition.
Because he explains what he thinks is true about the Omegas and how they're resetting the day, or how it's resetting them, whatever. Alphas and Omegas, one of them is doing it. Some of them are doing this whole thing, resetting the day, so that they can learn what the enemy's going to do, meaning humans are going to do, and then win and keep on winning. We've covered him in Almost Famous and Vanilla Sky, and he's tech support in this for Cruise, and he's tech support in Vanilla Sky. He's literally called tech support in Vanilla Sky. He's done more TV than film in recent years, but he's been in plenty of Cruise movies and small roles, or also, of course, Cameron Crowe. But there aren't that many big names in this movie, if you want to call that a big name, Noah Taylor, beyond Cruise and Blunt, and then Paxton and Gleason. The J-Squad actors are not actors we know even now, 10 years later. Tarantino knows everybody that's ever acted, so he would know these actors, and maybe some fan would say, what are you talking about? Franz Dreme, who plays Ford? Dragomir Mersic? He's one of my favorite actors ever. Okay, but not the average person knows any of the J-Squad people. Although Jeremy Piven apparently shot some scenes during the reshoots, but they didn't end up even using them. And maybe Cruise brought him in because they worked together, I think it was twice on the Mission Impossible films. I don't know who he played. Maybe he's supposed to be the one that she knew when she went through it before. One of the reasons why she, according to what I was reading online, there's a lot on Wikipedia about this movie. One of the longer entries I've seen on Wikipedia in a long time. I didn't go through all of it, but I went through a lot of it. Part of the reason she pushes back from getting to know Cage very well that one day is because she fell for somebody when she was going through all this. And I was wondering, was that Piven? Is that what he did?
Maybe.
And he had a flashback. But the movie is not even an hour and 55 minutes long, including all the credits. It's a fairly short modern action film. They could have had those scenes. It wouldn't have hurt the movie. It would have been probably 2 hours flat. That'd be fine. I'm not sure who he would have played, but that makes some sense.
I am not going to dispute any decisions they made in the edit suite because this is an immaculately edited film. And Doug Liman, thank you for making a movie under 2 hours.
Yeah, so rare. So credit to James Herbert. I assume it's Herbert, not Herbert. It could be French, I guess. And Laura Jennings. He has cut a lot of Guy Ritchie movies. I think he's Guy Ritchie's regular editor. I'm not a huge fan of his cutting style, generally speaking, meaning Guy Ritchie. And Laura Jennings worked on Ant-Man and the Wasp in Quantumania, is that what it's called, last year. But they're the two editors, and they probably should have been at the show as a nominee, at least, the Oscars, for their work here. Two of the bigger set pieces in the movie are when they get that van and they end up at the farmhouse. A mimic is on the trailer. That's a pretty impressive scene. And we find out that he knows she's going to die there. No matter what I do, you die here at this farmhouse. And that's where they bond. That's the biggest bonding experience they have in the whole film. But then he doesn't involve Rita by flying to the dam. He goes on his own. That's a trap! There's no Omega at that dam. It's under the Louvre. But it's because they get Carter's transponders, another big action set piece. There's a lot of them, I guess, but these are two of them. And that one is when they have to go to Brigham's office to get the transponder from him. They have to convince him. And all the little things that Cage knows, things like, wait 1 more second and then turn. And they're right behind people that would see them and maybe out who they are. Hey, yo, you're under arrest type of thing. But they turn exactly the right way. How many times did they go through this so you can remember that kind of detail, that guy turns exactly like that right there. And that's a pretty good set piece, too. And more opportunity for humor that Cage knows these things.
And that he goes into Gleason and tells him everything about his life and his secretary. How many times has he been through this? How many opportunities has he had to learn about them? So that he could just derail them long enough to just get the thing and split. At this point, actually, I think is where the movie gets a little shaggy. It kind of loses me with these action set pieces that are just there for the sake of being actiony. Once they're in the parking garage, it just feels like it's action for the sake of action.
Look how many times he's confronted by the guys in J-Squad who want to start a fight with him because he ran off on them. And he's able to just dodge them like he's some kind of Zen master because he's been in this fight before and then learned to dodge that way and then learned, okay, I got to dodge that way too. How many times did that happen? I mentioned earlier in the What Happens Next that I don't think this is really over. And you see Brigham announcing at the very end, there was a surge of energy in Paris, which of course is what Cage did to blow them up or blow it up, the Omega up, and presumably win this whole deal. I don't think this is over anyway, but surge of energy. And it's funny to think that he goes back. He wins and yet still goes back. So that supposedly happened. That's the surge of energy. They destroyed the Omega. And they must think that this is all over. There's no more aliens there. We can rebuild Europe now and have a life again as human beings, whoever is left in the world. And you could argue that's what the movie is saying that they're going to do. But I don't know, a surge of energy feels like that's a plant to me.
They were obviously setting it up for the potential of a sequel. But I also think that you could simply interpret it as he killed the Omega. The Omega reset back to the helicopter. Let's say it was 2 days before. And when that blast kills him, and it kills him in the past, too, that's an energy surge. It's just a way of saying exposition, too. You just need a way to inform the audience. It worked. So they say an energy surge. It's not the most elegant writing.
One reason I don't love the ending also, I think, is that it's nice that Rita lives again. You can come find her. Who are you? Smile. Credits. That's nice. That's fine. But J-Squad, including Skinner and Griff, who deliberately sacrifice themselves, as does Rita, they've done this great thing by sacrificing themselves for the cause, but they get to live again, which is nice, but it does lessen the impact of that. Too many action movies, too many movies, period. The Lord of the Rings group mostly all survived that hell they go through. The Avengers, apart from Tony Stark, survived what they went through. How is that possible that more of them died during the big battle at Endgame? This is another movie that does the same kind of thing, which is we all get to live again. Every main character that we cared about at all, including everybody in J Squad, is alive again.
I think that's the movie you're watching. I think it's a fun action flick that has a happy ending.
Just lessen the impact.
What's the impact? The impact is that you have a good time. I think this is a popcorn flick. It doesn't have a super strong emotional impact. It's just really fun. Actually, you know what bugs me the most about Edge of Tomorrow is a silly choice that they make, that the Omega alien is hiding at the bottom of the Louvre. Action movies cannot resist destroying landmarks. Why would it pick the Louvre? Pick an abandoned mine shaft. I don't know. There's just so many places that would make way more sense than the Louvre.
That's more fortified.
What's appealing about the pyramid at the Louvre?
That looks nice in the movie, is what it is.
It looks nice in the movie, exactly. And it takes me out of the movie every single time where I'm like, really? There?
I looked, by the way, the drive from the coast. I didn't know where they landed exactly. Maybe they said, and I didn't write that down, so I didn't know. I think maybe I chose Dunkirk. I forget now exactly what it was. Dunkirk's in France, right? Yeah.
It's on the northwest coast, regardless, right? Because they said it's the channels where they're holding them back. Their main thing is Heathrow. They're coming from Heathrow, so it's got to be the northwest coast.
So Verdun and Paris are both inland and about a 3-hour drive as well. So that makes some sense. It's not a 9 or 10-hour drive they're making, nor are they there in a couple of minutes. It's a pretty involved drive they're making to get there, or if they're going to fly a helicopter or a plane. It's a bit of a hike to get there, and I guess that makes sense. Tom Cruise, we've covered him only 4 times before this. I thought it was more, but I guess it's just Rain Man, A Few Good Men, which I did on my own, Interview with the Vampire, and Vanilla Sky. Although Chris and I did review three movies of his on Scoring at the Movies, our former sports movie podcast, The Color of Money, Days of Thunder, and Jerry Maguire. So this is 8 total I've talked about Tom Cruise. That is quite a lot. Apparently Brad Pitt was asked to do this first, and that's funny. He's a huge star, but I would have thought Tom Cruise would be the first choice for anybody for anything, especially an action movie. Although I guess you're going with Willie Mays or Henry Aaron, Stan Musial in that time frame, Joe DiMaggio, Mickey Mantle. You're going with somebody great no matter who you choose. You could just say, well, we thought it'd be Brad's movie more than Tom's movie.
When I talk about what Tom Cruise brings to the role, that vulnerability, that cowardice at the beginning, I just don't see Brad Pitt pulling that off. He's too cool.
He can play a loser, though.
Tom Cruise can play uncool. Yeah.
Pitt played a loser really well in Burn After Reading, for example.
Okay, but
12 Monkeys.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, I suppose he could have pulled it off. I just don't picture him in this part at all. It's impossible to picture anybody but Tom Cruise.
And he's not really this character for very long, but he does smarm better than most actors do in the early 5 or 10 minutes of the film. He does that better than even Pitt probably would have if he'd been in the role. We talked about Blunt's credits. We've not really covered any, but we've mentioned other things she's done. Of course, she was Mary Poppins a few years ago. Bill Paxton, I don't use the phrase rest in peace very often because I don't really mean it a lot of the time, but what a loss he was. It was 2017. It's been 7 years he's been dead now, just before the Oscars that year.
And Bill Paxton is a great throwback to Aliens.
Right.
This movie's so influenced by Aliens. I really suspect that casting Bill Paxton was very intentional.
And he was the coward in that.
Yes.
Competent, but a coward.
Doesn't Tom Cruise actually say game over at some point?
Somebody does, yeah.
Too? Yeah.
Game over, man. Game over.
Yeah. Lots of things influence this movie, but I don't think anything influences it more than Aliens.
Also, apparently, Starship Troopers, which is
Starship
one reason
Troopers,
why
Aliens, Groundhog Day, those three movies,
mixed into one. So he was in Apollo 13, of course, on the spaceship that nearly doesn't make it back, Titanic, and A Simple Plan, I think his best movie ever, at least his best role ever, A Simple Plan. Brendan Gleeson was in Braveheart, which I covered, I guess it was last year. AI has a relatively small role in that, and 28 Days Later, where he's so great as the dad. And we just saw Banshees of Inisherin again. Like that movie a lot. I liked it about as much as I did the first time. Not more, not less. It's funny. And he's pretty great in his role as Colm. Yeah, he's Colm. And I mentioned Noah Taylor's credits. We won't go over J Squad. There's something like 6 of them. I guess it's Charlotte Riley who has that, why do you take a big glass and shut the hell up? Or whatever the hell she says, that line.
So
such a cliche
clumsy
military line.
Yeah.
Although I guarantee you that in boot camp or in these situations, this isn't boot camp, that somebody would say that. They would hear that from a boot camp person probably when somebody in any way is being a pain in the ass, like in Officer and a Gentleman. What he's saying, you see him say at the end of the movie. Richard Gere rides off on his motorcycle. He sees the exact same routine Louis Gossett Jr. had put him through. So I guess I can see a private repeating things that they heard probably not that long ago.
It was bad enough we had to hear it once, but I think she says it maybe 3 or 4 times because we have to see that scene.
She's a bit of a tryhard, too. She doesn't sound natural.
And she's the Vasquez of this movie.
Right.
It feels also to me like she's a direct homage to Aliens.
Yep. Doug Liman, we've covered once before only. It was The Bourne Identity, which we covered, I guess, 2 years ago. He usually casts, or almost always at least, casts different stars in his movies, but has done a few with Cruise, and if he does the sequel with him, because he did Night and Day, I think it was.
American Made.
American Made, that's it.
Yeah.
Right, that didn't really succeed either, actually.
No, it's true. I didn't realize that was him directing. It kind of makes me want to go back and check it out, because I never did watch it.
Night and Day, I think it's Mangold, by the way, James Mangold. But yeah, Liman worked with Damon in Bourne Identity, Cruise in this movie. We talked about
Pitt in Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
So it's weird. I don't know if it's deliberate, but he rarely works with them over and over again. Unlike Christopher McQuarrie, who's worked with Cruise constantly in the past decade or so. I think it started with this movie. No, it wasn't this movie. So anyway, McQuarrie, who won the Oscar for The Usual Suspects screenplay way back in the mid-90s, has worked with Cruise on, I think, everything since around this point. And he has writing credits, I think, every time he directs with Cruise. And he's worked on 2 or 3 of the Mission Impossible films. For well over 10 years now, these guys have been joined at the hip. They're also the ones that did that motion smoothing video that everyone talks about, which we had to do on the TV we bought a couple of months ago. Oh, yeah. Get rid of that.
God bless them. They're doing God's work. If Wikipedia is to be believed, he deserves a lot of credit for the direction and the tone that the story goes in, and for making it a little less serious and a little more silly. And that was Cruise's idea, too.
Make it funny, yeah.
Yeah.
This is a funny story, or can be anyway. Jez and John Henry Butterworth also have credit on this. They're brothers. They had a credit on Ford versus Ferrari, which Chris and I covered on Scoring the Movies many years ago, and also Fair Game for Doug Liman. That is Sean Penn and Naomi Watts.
Great movie.
Based on the Valerie Plame thing, where she was outed by Dick Cheney, traitor. There were 16 producers on this movie, including executive producers Liman and Stephen Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary under Trump, was producing movies in this time frame. How much skimming off the top was being done by someone like that? Because I don't trust him for a second. But he was a producer on this film. It's 239-1. We watched it on Netflix. Dion Beebe shot the movie. He shot Chicago, which we covered many years ago. Won the Oscar, of course, Best Picture, 2002. He won an Oscar for Memoirs of a Geisha, which I remember being one of the most boring movies I had ever seen, at least at that point in my life. And coincidentally, probably, but he shot a lot of movies with Emily Blunt. And it's not like it's a director and an actress combination, so he couldn't really control that, but he has been behind the camera when she's been in front of it a lot of the time. I mentioned that Herbert and Jennings, the 2 editors, cut this, probably should have been at the show that year as nominees. And Christoph Beck was the composer. He works so often in the MCU now, but especially MCU TV shows, but he's also done a lot of comedies. We already said the cutting is great. What do you think about the look and the music?
Love the music, love the score, love the production design, except, our complaints about the monster design. I think they made the right choice with shooting 35. They totally pull it off. Apparently the shoot was really grueling, and Liman, just because of the way he works and because he likes to workshop, they were supposed to spend 2 weeks shooting the beach scenes, and they ended up spending something like 3 months. But I saw a great interview with Emily Blunt that talked about how she was one of the few women on set. Almost all the crew were men, and most of the cast was men. And she's like, I've been on movies like that before, and it means that as a woman, your voice gets really drowned out, and you have to couch everything she said. But she said it was one of the most collaborative movies that she ever worked on, and really appreciated the tone that the film set and that the leaders set to truly make her part of it. She said she sat in on every script meeting. I love to hear also when inclusive attitudes like that, whether it's towards women or just cast members in general, just your crew in general, whenever a film is collaborative like that it makes a great movie in the end.
I hope that one of her best experiences from a collaboration standpoint would be A Quiet Place and A Quiet Place Part 2.
I should hope so.
Her husband directed those.
I definitely hope so.
I hope they're in their top 5.
Otherwise, she would not have been in the sequel if it was that bad.
She ranked her movies in order, and we're going to rank something in a few minutes here about another movie. But if she ranked them in order, I hope they're in her top 5 or 10 at least. Okay, then last thoughts on Edge of Tomorrow, or what we should probably call Live, Die, Repeat. And apparently the DVD makes it very clear that's what Liman wanted. And it's funny that he would win out in the end. Maybe the studio thought later on, maybe that woman I talked about wasn't working there anymore and didn't have the power to say, we can't die or kill in the title.
Change the name of a movie, though.
But it's like this slogan,
Bad
which is
marketing.
what this is. The tagline is the title, and the title is the tagline.
But the name, when it was released in theaters, was Edge of Tomorrow. You just have to live with it. Save, live, die, repeat for the sequel. Okay, anyway, love this movie. More of this, please. I know this film was low-key considered a failure because it didn't do well in the North American.
But for what it cost.
Yeah, sure. But it's had a great second life in home media and some pretty devoted fans, including me.
It's an intense war film, but it's also fun. That's not an easy balance to make, but Liman achieves that pretty greatly, I'd say. And it's a clever idea to cast a guy who's always succeeding at things in his movies and make him so bad in the early going, at least in this one, at first. Blunt is the one who's the expert fighter and the one best suited to be the hero, and that wasn't the thing you'd expect from her at that point in her career, at least. Maybe ScarJo, Angelina Jolie. Okay, I see that, but here's this woman who's not known for action films and is so believable and is so cut and cool, and that move she does when we first see her, that little Pilates type thing.
Yoga. It's yoga.
Yoga, there you go.
You never get sick of watching it. Yeah, I'm a straight woman, heterosexual woman. I never got sick of watching it.
That's great. I guess the biggest weakness is that the aliens, I don't think, are very interesting themselves.
They're scary, but not interesting.
The cool visual effects, they're scary. They're boilerplate. In any case, while this isn't one of my 3 or 4 favorite cruise flicks, I do like it, and it's surprising that it didn't succeed more when it came out 10 years ago, because it deserved to. So that was how we saw Edge of Tomorrow, or Live, Die, Repeat. I just said that these 2 actors have pretty good chemistry in this film. Well, on Friday the 31st, I'll be wrapping up the merry, merry month of May by monologuing about 2 actors who had such great chemistry, they got married soon after and stayed together until the day he died. It's Bogey and Bacall in Howard Hawks' To Have and Have Not. And that will mark my 3rd Bogart film this year already at the end of May. Although one of those he was a supporting player in Dark Victory, the Bette Davis movie. But as for next Monday, we'll be lightening things up quite a bit after all the death and destruction we talked about this week by hearkening back to the fun times of our youth. I was 20 and Bev was 16 the year Reality Bites came out. I haven't seen it since the mid-90s, so it's time to find out if Ben Stiller's Gen X flick still holds up. We watched it last night. I won't comment on whether or not it actually does hold up. We'll talk about it in a week. The coming attractions opinion question for Reality Bites is this. Ben Stiller has directed 6 movies in his career. Reality Bites was his debut. Then it was The Cable Guy, Zoolander, Tropic Thunder, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, and Zoolander 2. You can make a case for 2 or maybe 3 of those being his best work, or even just your favorite of his movies. Maybe that's a better way of putting it. So put them in order. This is the question, or the assignment. Put them in order from 1 to 6, your favorite to your least favorite of his directed movies. Let's see if we match up, or listeners, if they match up with either of us, or at least come close.
So for our answer to that question, check out next week's podcast about Reality Bites. You already know how to find us, but let me remind you to favorite or subscribe wherever you listen, which is also where you can find our archive of hundreds of episodes that are available for free. While you're there, leave us a rating and a review. It's a great way to support the podcast. We're both on Twitter. I'm at Bev Ellis Ellis, and Ryan is at MovieFiend51. Or you can reach us by email, haveyouverisenpodcast@gmail.com. I'm also on Threads, by the way, at Bev Ellis Ellis, and you can find our podcast on YouTube. Our channel is at HYES Ellis. And to enjoy freshly roasted premium coffee delivered straight to you in Canada or the US, please go to sparkplug.coffee/HYES and enjoy a 20% discount.
All right, to end here, and to quote something that Cruz actually said to Blunt when she was concerned that she wouldn't be able to handle wearing that big mech suit, "Come on, stop being such a pussy. And Bev, stop being such a pussy and end this podcast, okay?"
And cut.